This is Pastor Keith DeMassen with Progressive Movement Towards Christ podcast. And you can catch us on Google Plus, Apple Podcast, SoundCloud.com, iHeartRadio, or any other venue that you listen to podcasts on. Again, this is Pastor Keith, and I'm coming from Progressive Movement Towards Christ Church podcast. And I want you to know today's sermon, the title of God Allows Incest. Yes, that's God allows incest. I'm coming straight from the Bible. And I just want to let you know I'm here and I'm happy, and I'm always pleased with God, and God is hopefully pleased with me and what He has decided for me to do. But today's sermon is on incest. God allows incest. I'm gonna go along with the sermon, and let's move forward. Now, there's numerous examples of incest in the Bible: Genesis 20:12, and Lot and his daughters, and Adam and Eve in Genesis 4, of course, and Moses, father Amram, who married his aunt Jochebed, Exodus 6:22, David's son Amnon with his half-sister Tamar, 2 Samuel 13. It's important to note that the last two instances, Tamar and Lot, one of the parties were unwilling in this situation, but all the others were willing participants. Now, you have to understand that back in the day, that of course Adam and Eve were justified with having sex with one another, and their kids having sex, because God wanted them to procreate the human race. So, of course, relatives had to have incest with other relatives in order to produce offspring, in order to populate the earth. Now, we have to understand at this time it wasn't incest, because at that time that the gene pool wasn't, how should I say it, wasn't corrupt. So when they had incest, the genes weren't corrupt, so there were no mutations or anything like that comes with incest today. However, now, like I said, you have to understand that at that time, in those periods, it was allowed because they needed to procreate the earth. And of course, after Moses built the ark and God flooded the earth, and of course, they needed incest to repopulate the earth. And that was just that was just the occurrence that had to happen in order to fill the earth back with a population. And incest, well, it wasn't called incest at the time. It was just a relationship between close relatives. It's what it says in the Bible, close relatives, relationships between close relatives. Now, not until God's commands had been revealed, until God commanded against it, it was not incest. It was just, like I said, marrying close relatives. But it was undeniable that God allowed incest in the early centuries of humanity, since Adam and Eve were the only two, of course, human beings on this earth. And the sons and daughters had no choice but to marry and reproduce siblings in order to populate the earth. Now, after Moses' time, sometime after Moses' time, it was discouraged. In God, in Leviticus 18 and 16 through 8, commanded against relationships between relatives or incest that occurred after God's commands had become revealed, because the gene pool was destroyed. it it would cause irreparable damage in the next generations because God had commanded against it. Now reproduction today is so strongly discouraged between closely related individuals has a higher risk of causing generic abnormalities. And that's why incest is not allowed. Now, incest is not allowed per God since Leviticus 18, but God says, command thy law, your country's laws, unless it goes against his word. But even country laws prohibit incest, prohibit having sex with closely related people. And today, having sex with someone close to you is a perversion. It's a perversion of sex. And of course, the time following Adam and Noah, it was not sinful. But now it is. And we have to understand that we cannot have incest. We cannot have any type of sexual relations with siblings, half-siblings, parents, aunts, and uncles. And in Genesis 2:24, it seems to indicate that marriage and sexual relationships between parents and children was never allowed by God. Understand, between parents and children, it was never allowed, even at the time when they needed to populate the earth. It was never allowed between parents and children. Incest, right, is very unsafe and very unwise. And, you know, God teaches us to be wise. God gives us the knowledge to be wise and be knowledgeable. And we should respect the truth from God, and we respect the judgment of God. And we should just respect God in everything he says and does. So after his commandment against incest, anybody that did do it will be judged. Will be judged by God. When you reach those pearly gates, you will be judged. Just like if you're caught here in the United States or almost any part of the world, you will in fact be punished. Judgment will be decreed upon you by God and by the courts of your country you live in. I never understood that, because there's too many people in the world that you can marry and have sexual relationships with. There's too many single people out there to have incestuous relations between your cousins, your parents, your children, your cousins. You don't need to go there. I'm strongly against any type of relationship, incestuous relationship, because you do not need to go there. And God doesn't want you to go there. Your country, your court system, your laws don't want you to go there. So, of course, if you get caught, you will be incarcerated. Just like if you did any other sin that was against the law. Just like if you rob a bank. Just like if you beat somebody up. Just like if you speed down the street. Just like if you hit somebody. Just like when you carry a gun, you're not allowed. Just like when you sell drugs. Anytime you break the law, anytime you break God's law, you shall be punished in one way or the other. So I recommend that you stay on that narrow path and not fall into that darkness, because you can't go back in time. So we have to live in real time, which is now, and in the future, and we have to believe in God and follow God's word and follow the laws of your country right now. I don't care if you're part of part of religion that allows sex between adults and children and whatever, married 10,000 people, whatever it is, that's against the law. That's against God's law. Because once you marry, you become one. So how can you marry 10 people and become one? It doesn't make any sense. Man and wife become one, not man and wives become one. It's man and wife become one. So please adhere to God's laws, adhere to your nation's law, and be respectful of everybody's personal space. Don't cross the line, because once you cross the line, God will judge you, and he will judge you harshly when you reach those pearly gates. So this is Pastor Keith, thanking you for listening to this sermon. And I'm with Progressive Movement Towards Christ Church, and this is our podcast. And we welcome you to invite your family and friends and your peers. And you can hear us on Apple Podcasts, Spreaker Radio, iHeartRadio, SoundCloud.com, and any other venue you listen to podcasts. Invite your family, invite your friends, invite everybody you know, because we're here to spread God's word. We're here to talk the truth that God gives us. And praise be to God. And again, this is Pastor Keith signing off, and can't wait till our next podcast, and I hope you will be listening. Bye-bye.